What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back at the Hometown Commander, back for another live stream in our Let's Playtest series. We're back for episode 2. I'm really stoked to do this for y'all. I hope that you enjoy coming in and hang out with me on Sunday night. Playtest some decks, have a good time, and just have some chats. Just wanted to start out by asking y'all, how has your week been? It's been a pretty fun week, a very interesting week here in the house for me. Um, Little one's going through some sleep issues this week, so it's always interesting when things change up and it forces you to kind of change your vibe a little bit and get things going. But that's okay. She keeps it interesting, and that's good. But um, I got out to play some games on Friday night. Had a great time. Getting to play some decks. I tried out Infinite Guideline that we did last week. I had a ton of fun trying that deck for the first time, and got to see some of those really cool cards in action and kind of work the way that I wanted to. And then I got to try the Bumbleflower build as well. Had a ton of fun with that one, kind of seeing that counter game come to fruition, what I was hoping to see. And yeah, it was good to get a couple games and have fun going up to the shop I go to. There's fourth. It's good to see you again, man. Or whoever you are. I'm glad to see you back again this week. Tonight's a fun one. Tonight is going to be two decks that I have varying levels of experience with. First off, we're going to talk about Isshin. Isshin is a deck that really the core of the deck started as Caesar. I talked about this a little bit on the channel. I love Caesar. I had a ton of fun with it, but I kind of wanted to get more out of our attack triggers making tokens. And as much as I messed around with Caesar, and I heck at one point even considered making this into Zergo, I kind of decided to switch over to Isshin because I think it facilitated exactly what I wanted the deck to do, and it opened up more options for other attack triggers and not just being Caesar where you're looking to just print tokens, or Zergo where you're looking to have your tokens die. I thought it just better facilitated more options across the board. I don't think the deck's perfect. I think it does a good job at making tokens with things like Anax Strike Leader and Nimbicall. Adeline, your mobilized stuff from Tarkir Dragonstorm, and things like Mural and, like I said, the mobilized stuff. Got to add in some things like Skyharner Strike Force that can hand out melee, which is a pretty fun ability considering you get it twice because of the attack trigger and all the tokens you have laying around. Really, the goal here was to continue to take advantage of things like Arabella and Mishra and Commissar Severina Rain that deal damage or lose life to your opponents whenever you're attacking with X and many creatures. Really just to take advantage of the wide board and have a ton of fun. So as we get into our playtest, that's the goal. Get a board that's going to start creating tokens on attack or offensively. And then a lot of the times what I end up doing is not deploying Isshin until I have enough value pieces on board to make them worth doubling. I think that it just kind of depends on what board we're going to run in. And Isshin, I think, is one of those cards that is going to get removed because it's pretty obviously a nice value engine. And so I think I always try my best to make sure I'm deploying it at the right time, not putting it in harm's way unless I don't have to, and just trying to be strategic with what we put them in. Force says, brought the key pre-con in my local store and played against a couple of buddies. One was Ur Dragon, the other was running more fun with dragons. I beat them both. That's great. Dragon decks are particularly tough. We're going to talk about one later today. They could be very swingy. They could be very interesting decks. A lot of them times you depend on ramping into your right resources and deploying your things. But I think the thing that they rely on is creatures, right? If you find a way to shut down creatures or you find a way to outvalue them. I mean, one flying 8/8 is scary, right? But if you can go wider than 1/8/8, you can manage it. So I think it's nothing that, it's not like just because a big flyers deck is automatically hard to beat. There are plenty of ways to get around it. And it's great that you took the precon in and had a good time against them. But let's get in here to playtest number 1. So kind of iterating on what we did last week. I think my goal was to try to get 30 or 40 minutes into both decks, and that's fine. I don't mind pushing it a little bit. I picked out 5 hands this time. If we hit the 5 hands, we do. If we don't, that's great. Mainly, I just want to hang out with you guys, have some chats with you guys that are in the chat, walk through these hands, kind of talk about what my goal is for these decks, what we're looking for, what we're trying to put together, and then, if we get that from in hands, that's great. This is an odd 5-lander. Of course, it's very, very rare in Mardu. You're going to see this many lands in one hand. But we pair it with a couple really great things. There's Adeline, probably my favorite of the token generators in the deck, because Adeline doesn't have to attack in order to make you the tokens that are attacking each player. The second part that's great about Adeline is that Adeline then grows, right, for each creature you have, making Adeline a huge threat as well. The only downside to Adeline is that it only has 4 toughness, right? So you got to be kind of careful with where you swing Adeline because it's pretty easy chump block. But if we could start getting things like evasion or any other abilities on Adeline, it could be a really huge threat. And the second card of our hand is a little wonky, but it's an effect that is really cool depending on how you stack your triggers. So Redoubled Stormsinger says whenever it attacks, for each creature token you control that entered this turn, you make a copy of it that's tapped and attacking an opponent, and beginning your next end step, you sack those tokens. So what we're generally going to want to do with Redoubled Stormsinger is allow all of our other abilities that make tokens first before its abilities, so that way it can effectively double and quadruple and triple up on those tokens to make even more affecting our opponents. Turn 1 here, we draw probably, in my opinion, one of the best 2-mana plays you could play before Adeline in Anak Strike Leader. This is a creature says whenever it or your commander attacks for each opponent, you make a 1/1 goblin attacking them. And that would be good enough on its own, right? That's why we play something like Adeline, and we love that effect. But I think Strike Leader takes it a step further and makes it a great card for this deck, and the ability just to sacrifice itself to give all of our tokens indestructible to the turn. This just protects our board, and most of the time, I think what that does is either protects us on a big attack or is used to sacrifice right on somebody else's turn to protect our board so we can untap and have a good time. Turn 2 here, we see Lannery Storm, great, right? Can make tokens, really great with Isshin. And a lot of times, in the times that I've played Isshin early, before you've set up a good board, it's been after playing something like Lannery Storm. Just start making 1 or 2 treasures per attack, right? Where you can really start getting access to more mana. So can't attack with Anak, but at least it comes down. And then I think here it's just Adeline and start swinging. Hopefully we can find a safe spot to put Anak Strike Leader on turn 2. To be honest, I have a tough time believing we wouldn't have a safe place to put it, because not every deck's going to have a scary enough threat to always block that. Now there is a world where we have to lose Anak Strike Leader here, which would really stink. But I think my philosophy here is I'd rather get this started and take advantage of it than not. And worst case scenario, you sack the Strike Leader, give them all indestructible, protect them, and no, neither of these go away at the end of combat, right? The goblins stay, the humans stay. So unlike Mobilize, we get to keep these around, and they're just going to continue to be threats for us on the board. So again, we're going to operate under the knowledge that Anak Strike Leader didn't die and that it's safe. And so now the question becomes, do you Stormsinger or do you Isshin? Right? Both of them, I think, effectively are going to lead us to the same number of tokens that are on the board, right? Isshin's going to double up each of these, making 3 more each. This is going to double up, technically, each of them, making 3 more each. The difference, right, is Isshin doubles up the triggers that aren't temporary, whereas Redoubled makes temporary tokens. So in my head, I think I like Isshin a little bit better here because these tokens get to stay around, right, and provide me with more value. I love trying to get something like Caustic Bronco down, if I could. It's a nice piece of card draw, but I think Isshin's the answer here. And again, you make the attacks. 6 humans, 1 at each. 6 goblins, or 6 goblin, or 6 humans, 2 at each. 6 goblins, 2 at each. Right. So you're spreading this love, and again, we're trying to take over the tempo of getting these tokens in, getting them going, right, and putting the pressures on our opponent. This is the turn where I expect Strike Leader probably has a harder block, right? Adeline is brutal this turn if we can get her in anywhere, but it's okay if we don't. I think as long as we don't put her in too much harm's way, this is still a very good attack. I'm more willing to lose Anok than I am Adeline. Adeline is just a very good effect, especially since that power grows, right? We're at what? 6, 12, 18, 21. So Adeline's just absolutely huge. So again, and if Strike Alert is going to get killed, sack it. Give all the tokens indestructible on a turn. Keep them alive, almost guaranteed, right, through combat, and then just hope we don't get wiped, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's our real threat at this point. Is this deck is can we survive a board wipe? And then as we come back to our turn, I mean, Lannery Storm can come in and attack. But I almost feel like, well, no, it's redoubled on attack. So we'd have to go with something like Lannery Storm. And again, run this again. The only downside about this hand is that we've just seen no way to buff the tokens. But I think that's okay, because in the grand scheme of things, we're adding 6 of them each time to going at each player. Then these other ones that are there get to attack again. We're just hopefully just going to beat our opponents by 1,000 cuts, as long as they can't deal with our board. And just hope that now the strike leader can get out of the way. The thing to note now is that we don't have to swing with the strike leader this turn, because we can swing with Isshin and trigger the ability. And that's arguably better for us, because Isshin being a 3/4 is a whole lot easier to deal with in combat for us than a 2/2 is, right? So it's easier to maneuver where we want to put Isshin as a 3/4, and I want to value that sacrifice ability. So I think this is not a bad place to stop here. I mean, ideally, we would have loved to have seen a buff or something like that. But I think it's important to see that this is a strategy that can get out of hand. It's one of the things the deck's designed to do. We just would have loved to have seen something that either damages our opponents when things come in, given them a buff. Something like Gold Knight Commander or Cathar's Crusade that, gives them a buff every time a creature comes in, right? There's so many other ways that we could have hit support pieces here to like really benefit this board. But I like that at least the proof of concept is there. Lannery would have added 2 extra treasures this turn, so we would have had 4 mana left. We could have deployed something like, Krenko or something like that for next turn, or redoubled for next turn. And I think we're in a good spot. Hopefully we can just outpace our opponents here on them getting enough threats down to really take care of us. And if something like Isshin or Adeline hits single target removal, that is what it is. The nice thing about Isshin is we can always recast it. Of course, if Adeline hits single target removal, that's where I think having a backup like something like Krenko is nice, right? The only difference, right, is Krenko doesn't make those tokens in tapped and attacking. It just puts them on the battlefield. So there's kind of a difference. But if we were to hit something like War Leader's Call or Impact Tremors or Perforos, right, we wouldn't care either way. The point is they're damaging when they come in, and that's one of those layers, right, we can add to this strategy to deal the damage to our opponents. Probably could have beat the dead horse for a turn or two more, but the truth is, like, either someone has the wipe, a way to remove one of those things printing our tokens, or we just continue to exponentially create more tokens until the game's over, right? I mean, that's a little Christmas landy, but it just goes to show you that you want to see these lines play out so that you know what you're working for. Let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping the 3-lander, but we see Soul Ring, we see a Talisman, we see Inquisitor Rosette, equipment I like in this deck. Whenever the equipped creature attacks, you make a warrior token with vigilance. It's attacking, then all your creatures get menace. Again, I like the idea of stamping menace on a bunch of 1/1s, right? Making them harder to chump block, making more of that value come through. And then with Brutal Horde Chief, whenever a creature attacks, defending player loses a life and we gain a life. So again, trying to make some pain points in our creatures attacking. Note that with an effect like Horde Chief or Hell Rider, which is a very similar ability that we play in the deck, our tokens coming in off Adeline and those abilities won't trigger Horde Chief because it is an attack trigger. So only the tokens that actually declare the attacks will trigger it. But again, even if it's 0 this turn, hopefully it's 3, 6 next turn, right? And you could start to see that damage cascade right into some good effects. But I like this hand. I do have a way to make tokens. I do have a nice threat, and we're going to hopefully ramp up pretty quickly here that we can kind of mask the fact that we don't have the tokens, and we have a potential way to print them there in Dollmaker's shop. So my thought here is we can either pay the life for the Sacred Foundry or just put this landscape in and get these down, soaring into Talisman. Okay, well, turn 2, we see Adeline, which we'll take. I have no way, unfortunately, to get Adeline. I do have a way to get Adeline down, but I wouldn't have a way to get Dollmaker's shop down, right? Because I'd have to crack this for like a white, but unfortunately, right, it comes in tapped. So I just don't have the third white, right, to get Dollmaker Shop in, but I could get the Rosette in. That's my thought, right? White, white, and one in colorless for the Rosette. Hopefully, something like the Rosette where we could get attached next turn and get the Dollmaker Shop in if we want to, just depending on what we get access to. Ooh, Impact Tremors definitely makes a difference, right? That's going to hopefully just start damaging. So we've got what, 6 mana exactly. And I do have enough to get Isshin in and attach the Rosette. If I do that, though, I can't play the Tremors. I almost feel like Tremors is worth playing because it's something that even if somebody removes Adeline or Isshin, right, it sticks around and it becomes a threat. So my thought is if I play the Tremors and I attach the Rosette, I'm making the 3/1/1s. I'm making the Astartes Warrior, and they're all getting Menace, which makes me feel like they have a better chance of sticking around again because I can resolve my triggers in the order to make the 3 humans first off Adeline's ability, and then have the Rosette's ability go off, making me that Astartes Warrior, and then giving them all Menace, right? So I think that makes the most sense to me. I'm still dealing 4 damage off the Tremors this turn to everybody. And then I have 4, of these tokens with Menace and Adeline with Menace, which on turn 3 may guarantee some. I mean, it's only 5, but it may guarantee some damage, right, into an opponent on turn 3 if they don't have something or if they have just a bad block, right? A little mana dork or, a cheap little tutu or something that we can take advantage of. And we're just going to try to point the attack the right direction. So coming into this turn, the question's going to be, as long as Adeline survives, what makes the most sense? Again, we have the mana for Isshin. Unfortunately, if I play Isshin, I don't have the mana to put like Dollmaker Shop down. I'd have to crack this landscape. But remember, we used it last turn to equip the Rosette and take that line, right? Did we have to use it last turn to equip the Rosette? No, that's 5. We should have been able to. We should have been able to crack this, shouldn't we have? Because that's one there, one in red in there for the Tremors. Yeah, we should have been able to crack that landscape last turn. I don't think I even realized and picked that up. Well, if I did crack it, I guess it's for white since we have, something like that. But okay, we're in the world where we didn't crack the landscape. So let's crack it, right? So that we don't get ourselves in too much trouble. Got one black source there. I actually think it might need to be. I guess it doesn't have to be a black source. We have at least one. We don't have anything in our hand that's requiring that much black, but we do have something like the gallery that can require 2 white. And then my thought's just Isshin. Because now you're attacking this turn, you're making 6 humans and 2 Astartes warriors, right? And everything is getting menaced twice. Not that that matters, but you're now dealing 8 damage off the Tremors. And now you have more tokens, right? We're obviously going to attack with the original ones as well. And I think now we're in a good position to just continue to put the value on board. The thing I like about the Rosette specifically is that it can attach to anything, right? It can be on anything attacking. Again, now I think we're really susceptible to a board wipe, but we're always going to be as a tokens deck. But I think if we're smart, this deals some good damage to our opponents. We can try to put, again, Adeline in the right position to get some damage through. If it doesn't get damage through, then it takes a blocker out of the way. And I think our opponents are just dead to Porcelain Gallery on our turn if no one has any response, right? Because Porcelain Gallery turns all of our creatures into XXs, where X is the number of creatures we control. And we're going to print at minimum 8 more creatures next turn, and I think that's just brutality, right? So if our opponents don't have it this turn, even if they remove Isshin and Adeline, I still think they're in trouble, right? Because Porcelain Gallery would turn these all into what, 12/12s? Right? I still think that's plenty enough to deal with our opponents. Can our opponents each block effectively 4 12/12s coming at them, right? So, yeah, I mean, ideally, if they're around, great. If not, I mean, I think the Porcelain Gallery is just enough. You also have the Deluge as a backup if somebody wipes the board. We still have a way to get rid of them. And then, you could always go into something like the Horch if you want. But that's why I like the Gallery so much, is It's not the side we use the most. We use the side to get those toys the most, right? But I think the gallery is such an interesting half of the card because remember that one, opening up a room is a special action and not casting a spell, and two, at least the people in my playgroup are going to know this card for Dollmaker Shop because I use it more often than not, right? And the gallery, I think, gets kind of forgotten about, especially when you see somebody just printing the toy tokens off of the Dollmaker Shop side. So I like that. I think we got to see a good mix on this one, of a stand-in for making tokens, getting the menace, and then seeing that damage outlet, in the impact tremors really come in handy, right? 4 and then 8, right? So 12 total is a lot of damage. If you think about it, over a quarter of your opponent's life totals, and they still have to deal with the attacks and the other things involved. But let's go into playtest number 3. If you're watching, I'd love to chat with you. Give me your thoughts in the chat. Give me what you think, even if it's not about Isshin. I'd love to chat with you and make the space your own. But all right, 3-lander here. A little bit more awkward, right? We got a couple 5-mana creatures, but I still think we're all right. Caustic Bronco does allow us to kind of get cards into our hand. It's better once it's saddled, and Isshin's the perfect power to saddle the Bronco to get it to go off twice. So we do have a way to dig. We also have Strike Force that becomes a nice threat on its own, giving all of our creatures melee. So hopefully we can make it up to Ulthari, a creature that prints Rebel tokens every turn, and that increases for the amount of times it's attacked. And then Goldspan, right, making the treasures. So hopefully we can get up to 5, but I don't mind it right now. Caustic into Isshin isn't a bad 2-3 just to start digging 2 cards deep with the Bronco, right? So turn when we send another land, perfect. I mean, that's great. That's what we wanted to see. Now we're only 1 land away from getting up to our big 5-mana creatures, and there it is. We hit it. So again, I like the Bronco this turn. I was going to say, unless something really changes my mind, it's Isshin this turn. Zergo Thunder's Decree is interesting, right? This isn't the Zergo that draws you cards when creatures die. This is the one that just turns off your mobilized tokens from being sacrificed. And to me, this is huge, right? Because especially when we talk about the side of our deck that cares about like creatures attacking and dealing damage, I really like this Zergo turns off the fact that they have to be sacrificed, right? Because then you're getting more attacks turn over turn, especially if you could start buffing them. I still think it's worth. I guess if I run Isshin, though, here, I'm pretty much guaranteed to pitch a card, right? Because Costa Bronco is going to go digging on cards. So my question is Zergo or Strike Force? Zergo would be nice. It could start getting me, it'd give me 4 tokens next turn because I'd pretty much plan to play Isshin next turn. Strike Force is just going to get me better attacks. I think I like Zergo. Fourth says he's been going through his bulk to see what Attorney's cards you can put into your precon with Kilo as the commander. There's so many great spacecraft, and even uncommon that are probably great. And that deck has some great spacecraft. I love what is it? Uthros Research Craft. Such an interesting card. Yeah, there's so many things I can think of. I'll try to think of some more options for you here as I'm running through this, but I think Zergo this turn, and then I'll run the risk on Caustic Broncos. When it attacks, you reveal the top card of our library and put it into our hand. We lose life. We go to its mana value if it wasn't saddled. Unfortunately, I couldn't saddle it with Zergo, so we just got to take the 1 here from the Skull Clamp, but Skull Clamp's great. It means we could clamp the Warriors for card draw. I like it. It means nothing but good things for us. So here going into turn 4, I think my thought is Isshin, get the clamp down, saddle the Bronco so that now our opponents are going to lose life equal to what we reveal. And then now Zergo can make the tokens when it attacks. So the thought on this attack is making 4 warriors, right? Mobilize 2, going off twice. Caustic's first flips a Toxic Deluge. That's 3 damage each opponent, and then it caves, so no. So, but again, the point is we're drawing, right? We're getting cards into our hand. Our opponent's lost a little bit of life. And we got some great value in digging cards off the top. I think Caustic's probably a good block for our opponents here, so we do need to be a little bit careful. It's really giving us card advantage. Zergo should be fairly okay as a 2-4. I'm not really that worried about it. But again, having the Warriors stick around is only going to be good for us for something like Melee. Remember, Melee is an attack trigger. It's not just a straight buff. Melee is an attack trigger, meaning with Skyfront or Strike Force out, we're going to get double Melee. So if we're attacking all of our opponents, it's +6/+6 to all our creatures. This is why I like, again, something like Zergo not having those Warriors die is now we can really give them a good buff, right? So coming into our next turn, do you go Othari? I think the answer is still Strike Force, mainly because I think it leads to the most damage to our opponents. I could go digging on a Skull Clamp if I want to, because I won't be able to do it after we attack, right? Because I'm gonna get 4 warriors that are 1/1s, and then I'm gonna have 4 warriors that are 7/7s, right? Because melee is an attack trigger, right? So the ones that get printed off of Zergo's ability, right, aren't gonna get the +6/+6. So I guess it makes more sense to clamp main 2, right? It doesn't make sense to clamp before combat. So I'd probably saddle up the Bronco again. Again, the Bronco's eventually going to get blocked and killed. We might as well use it for the advantage as much as we can. Go to combat attack. Bronco sees land and land. All right, well, that's unfortunately just the reality sometimes, right? It's going to hit lands, and we don't mind that. So again, 4 more warriors from Zergo, and then everything that attacked is going to get +3 twice, right? Because we're going to be attacking 3 opponents here. And Strike Force is now an 8/8 in the air. Or no, it's not attacking. Sorry. But everything else is going to have it. So Zergo gets the buff, Caustic Bronco gets the buff, and these 4 warriors that we declared attacks with get the buffs, right? These 4 will just come in, tapped and attacking. And now that's going to hopefully protect Bronco being an 8/8 versus a 2/2, right? And then we're going to end up pitching a couple lands. We could just crack one of these off a Skull Clamp just to see if we can get into something else. I mean, draw 2. I kind of don't really see a reason not to, just to see if we can hit anything special. We don't. So I'd probably go 1, 2, 3. I'm probably just looking for lands that come in untapped at this point, right? Because we already played our land. We played the caves for turn. And now, I mean, it's just up to our opponents, right? Can they shake some of the big things? The scary part is I think Strike Force is the hardest threat on our board right now. That melee getting doubled is brutal, right? Every creature just turns into a real threat. We have this Deadly Rollick we can cast for free in opponent's turn to try to, take out a key creature or stop something that's going to happen. And then in our next turn, we get a fun interaction with Enduring Courage, where all those warriors will come in. Will actually get +2/+0 because they come in if we want to do that. We could get something like Goldspan in and start printing the treasures, and then Goldspan would be a 10/10, right? Because of the melee. Melee is just a really bonkers ability, and it's something that I've tried to put into the deck as much as I can. I've really gone back and forth on Adriana. She's the 5-mana legend who gives all your creatures melee. I've really gone back and forth on it, but I've seen how much great work Skyhunter's done, which has kind of made me want to put her in and take advantage of that ability. But I like this one. I mean, other than a board wipe happening, I think we're in good shape. If somebody removes Skyhunter, great. That's it is what it is. And there's nothing we can do about that. But again, we're still presenting good value. Maybe we go into Goldspan, start trying to print some treasures. We also have Skull Clamp, so we could start clamping a couple warriors just to draw some cards, see what we can get ourselves into, right? Maybe we hit another buff, maybe we hit a damager, and I think we're just in half decent shape on that one. I think we've kind of established what our goal was, and gotten to it, which, again, to me in playtesting, that's your goal. Your goal's not necessarily to see A to B on a win. Your goal is to get yourself in a scenario on board where you understand what your line is, what your advantage is, and, how would you then look to, play your next turn, right? Depending on what you have. Fourth says it. Plus, I've only been playing for a month or so. I'm still learning ideas for decks. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing that's probably the most difficult for new players. Is number one, the card pool for Commander is massive. It's a massive amount of cards in Commander, and I can understand how hard it is to build decks and learn new cards. That's why I love both EDHREC and Scryfall as resources. EDHREC can give you specific recommendations for your commanders. Scryfall is a great way to go searching through cards. One of the best things you can do for yourself with Scryfall is go click on their syntax button, which kind of allows you to learn what you can search for in a quicker way. And it really lets you find cards. And if you're looking for specific keywords or specific ideas, like even like phrases, like you could search for, attacks or attacking, and you can find cards that have that word. You could search whenever a creature enters, right? And I mean, that's interesting. But I think one of the hardest things when you start building decks for yourself and you start to figure out where their cards belong, I think you kind of have to figure out what do you want the deck to do, and then start putting things in that make that a reality, and then removal. If you have your commander that really has an ability that you want, maybe you start adding protection. And a lot of my decks that go wide, I try to find spells that protect my entire board, indestructible, hexproof, things like that. That's why I don't think I have an opinion on what should or shouldn't happen in the deck. That's fair. I think to some degree that's fair, right? But hopefully, as you play games with your deck, that's the other portion of it. As you play games with your deck, you're learning, oh, these are the abilities that work really well. Man, when I get to make, a Thopter every turn, right? Then, man, it allows my account of all these cards that care about how many artifacts even better. I want the deck to win isn't the right answer. No, it is the right answer. That's the funny thing is it should be the answer. You should want to know, how do I win the game and how do I put my deck forward to win the game. Um, at the end of the day, I think you should want to play to win the game. Commander is just one of those formats where the social interaction of the game is to some degree equally as important. Although you should still want to know how your deck does what it wants to do, and that's why I think specifically, even if it's just playing test hands on your own, like trying to understand, okay, in your sense, how do I get to that mana to get Kilo down? How do I get to the mana to deploy my threats? What am I looking for in my opening hand? Like, what's the card that if I see it in my opening hand, I want to keep that hand because that's a good hand, right? And then I think you just start to piece this information together, right, over the course of multiple games. And when you start to realize that, something like Tekethal that says whenever I proliferate twice is a card I really like seeing. Okay, how do I find more cards that care about me proliferating, and how do I do that? Or what are other cards that let me proliferate, right? And then you start to kind of build your deck out of cards that care about when you proliferate, care about that can proliferate, or what are things that can put counters on itself or other things, right? So that I can proliferate onto them, right? You can start to see this branching tree of what your deck's trying to do, right, kind of come before you, and you start putting cards in categories, right? This helps me proliferate. This cares about me proliferating. This puts counters on things so I can proliferate, right? And then I think you could start to see cards in these different buckets, and then you can start to understand, okay, well, I want to see a card that cares about me proliferating and a card that can put counters on it every game so that I can, set the strategy up, right? It's the same as kind of what we described here, right? We want to see a creature that makes tokens on attack, and we want to try to find a way to profit from making those creatures on attack every game, right? And if we can do that, then we're going to lead to our combats being a little bit easier and dealing more damage, right? So it's kind of like finding that guide for yourself in your deck and adding more cards in each of those buckets so that you can see more of them every game. Of course, we always want to see the one card, right? We always would love to see the same 6 cards. It's just not how Commander works. We have a 99 card deck that has all singleton except your basics, right? So we need to find cards that share a similar archetype, but do it a little bit differently so that we can see at least one of them, right? And that's why I think for this text, I'll give a practical example of that. That's what I like about Mobilize specifically from Tarkir, is that it's adding a ton more creatures that can make tokens on attack, right? So now I have a lot more options of those. It's not just Adeline and Anax Strike Leader and creatures that have Myriad, right? Now I have more options. I have more things that can do it, and I have an equipment that can give Mobilize to something. There's just, to me, it's like when you start to see that through line through your cards, you can start to kind of understand, okay, well, this card may be strictly worse than this other card, but it's still cool because it does what I want it to do. I just feel bad, awkward when friends of the card shop tell me to put certain cards in the deck that, while they're really good to put in my deck to win, don't match the theme, and that's fine. You should never feel like you have to put a card in your deck, right? Your deck should be a reflection of what you want your deck to be. Now, if your theme is a certain style of art or a certain set, like we talked about last week, you talked about wanting your deck to only be Edge of Eternity stuff, like, that's okay. You should want to have the deck that you want to have. But if you want your deck to be, objectively stronger, or if you're trying to push your deck to have the best cards that you can have in that strategy and things like that, then you have to kind of sacrifice your theme in that sense, right? And play those cards. But no one should ever tell you that it's wrong to not want to have a theme in your deck or not build your deck the way you want to build it. But if your goal is to objectively make your deck the best you can make it, sometimes, right, you do have to let that theme go out the window to pursue that. And that's why you notice as you go up into bracket 4 and push your way up higher, you start to notice that homogenization of deck lists and counter, commanders always playing the same 10 cards. If you're in a commander of a certain archetype, you're kind of going to always play certain cards because they're the best cards for that archetype, right? And that's okay if that's what you want. But if you don't want that, don't feel bad for not wanting that. I think at the end of the day, you should want to play Magic the way you want to play it. Interact with the game the way you want to interact with it. Find your fun in the format. And find people who encourage your fun in the format and not demonize your fun in the format. And I think if you can do that, you'll have a lot more fun rather than always feeling like you have to push yourself to the brink, right, to play the game. I think at this point, there's way too many commanders and way too many cards for us not to have fun and to find the commanders that we like and do it to it. And here's a perfect example of a deck in front of you that's had technically 2 different commanders at the helm, but really could have like 6. I could have this have one of 6 commanders and probably spin the deck to be what I want it to be. But over time, right, as I played the deck, I realized, no, I actually think I want it to be this commander. And then I made some changes, right, when I went towards Isshin to turn that Caesar deck into Isshin and have what I wanted the deck to do shine, right? I don't know if I just rambled or if that makes any sense, but I hope that the through line of that rambling is that you make the deck you want to make, and I hope that the deck performs the way you want it to and makes you happy. And even if it angers your friends, I hope that the deck, you enjoy it and you have fun, because at the end of the day, if you want to play Magic for a long time, it's not the best cards that are going to help you enjoy the game. It's decks that you want to play. So let's get in with the game. What's this, playtest 4 for Isshin? 3-lander, we got a couple rocks, which is great. I mean, of course, not being in green, not being in blue, we don't have much ramp, we don't have much card draw, so seeing these rocks in opening hands are great. Thunder of Unity is a card that I truly don't see talked about in these Mardu shells, and I really like it. It's a saga that on the first part is going to draw us 2 and lose us 2. This is Night's Whisper. These 2-3 mana black spells that draw you a couple cards and lose you a couple life. And then on 2 and 3, it's basically an Impact Tremors plus. Whenever a creature we controls enters, each opponent loses 1 and we gain 1. This is strictly better than Impact Tremors in that sense, right? Because we're gaining 1. But again, it's great because if you think about it, if we can, and I think where the downside of the card is you have to line up turns 2 and 3, right? But in a deck like ours, where we're just trying to spam tokens on attack and do these things, Thunder Unity is great. Saga 1 is a draw spell. 2 and 3 is trying to weave it into our game plan so that we're hitting it at the right time and it becomes a copy of War Leader's Call or Impact Tremors or Perforos right for us in the deck. So we don't have to play it. It's not like we have to play it turn 3 and lose out on its ability. We still want to play it at the right time, but it's nice that we have access to it if we need it. So again, I like it. Not much to do turn 1. That's not what I meant to do. Not much. I didn't even look. Not much to do turn 1, but that's okay. Spectator Seating, I think, is the best play here. Gives me the cairns if I need the black, but also gives me the white if I want to just go into, like, one of the rocks. Turn 2, think it's the Conviction, unless there's seriously a reason why I would play Felwar. Unless somebody really has one of my colors and I'm worried about it. But I mean, I have an equal spread over these 3 cards for any of my turn 3 plays I'd want, so I'm really not worried about that. Turn 3, 4 mana. So there's a couple arguments to how we could run this turn. You could go Felwar into Dollmaker's Shop. It's a little bit awkward because the shop's going to sit there for a turn, but I think we're using the most of our mana. I could go Felwar into Zurgo as long as somebody has specifically black. Well, I guess I can choose where I want on the cairns, right? So those 2, and then as long as somebody has red or white, then Felwar, that could work. That could be a nice lead into maybe something like Dollmakers plus Thunder of Unity next turn to get that train started, because then we could get Isshin in the second turn this goes off and double up the mobilize, right? So that's not a bad line. I think I like Zurgo. I could see the reasoning for the Dollmaker Shop as well, but next turn we could Thunder plus Dollmaker Shop, and then the next turn Isshin into its second saga going off, right? Because my thought there is this draws us 2 and loses us 2. Let's see if this really changes our line. 3 mana left. We see a Boros Signet. So I actually could go Boros Signet into the Dollmaker Shop. Zurgo could attack this turn, right? Make us the Warriors, which will net us a toy, right? I think on turn 4, we're safe probably jumping Zurgo in somewhere. Now on this turn, right, Thunder of Unity is going to turn online. We'll get... sorry, the Warriors don't die. I apologize. They don't automatically sacrifice, but I have a... Let's just say somebody blocked one of them and killed it. I think it's fair enough to assume that somebody's going to have a cheap 1/1 sitting around. Or something to block into the Warrior. Certified, we more than enough mana. I mean, we could turn on the Porcelain Galler if we really wanted to, and now that I'm thinking about it, because we really have nothing else to do this turn. The Flare, we could give up Zurgo or Isshin to Flare if we really needed to. So if I turn on the Gallery this turn, and I attack, I'm making 4 Warriors off of Zurgo's ability doubled. And then I have at least 1 Warrior last turn in Zurgo, so I'm making 4 toys, right? So this is 8 triggers of Thunder of Unity, so everybody's losing 8, I'm gaining 8. And then with Porcelain Gallery online, these are all 12 12s. So, I mean, that's just a perfect example of hitting that at the right time to take advantage of that Thunder of Unity. So the toys, weren't tapped and attacking, right? So the toys, unfortunately, aren't attacking. These Warriors are, though. And the toy that we had last turn is still attacking. It just doesn't trigger Dollmaker Shop, right? Because Dollmaker Shop has non-toys attack to trigger it. So again, you have what? Zurgo, a toy, and all the Warriors attacking. Again, they're all 12 12s. We either spread them out or we try to go after... I mean, at minimum, I'd probably try to go after one person specifically. If not, maybe try to go towards the second one. Pretty much no matter what. We know we're in line for a great thing next turn. If somebody's going to wipe the board, I'm more than willing to give up Isshin to get into a Flare of Fortitude, because then Isshin's only 5 mana to bring down next turn, and I can do that. I don't want to give up Zurgo's. Remember, Zurgo's the thing that's printing me the tokens right now, right? 4 tokens a combat is huge, especially since these don't sacrifice if they don't die. And as 12 12s, they're not going to die in combat unless somebody's blocking them with a Death Toucher, right? So I'm more than willing to give up Isshin for the Flare of Fortitude, and then I'm more than willing to replay it since this is already online. This would be up at 3. We make 8. We make 4 Warriors off the Zurgo, and then we would make 6 toys off the Dollmaker Shop, because we should have Warriors and Zurgo attacking different players. And then now you're talking about 6 plus 4. You're talking about 10 damage off the Thunder of Unity alone, and then getting into combat. Right? So a little Christmas landy in kind of how our spells worked out, but it just goes to show you why I like Thunder of Unity so much, if we can get it in and deployed at the right time. Well, let's do one more playtest, and then we'll switch over to Ureni. It's just I love this deck, and I could talk about this deck for hours. I think Isshin's a ton of fun. It's pretty much everything I've wanted this deck to do, and I'm so excited to see new cards so I can continue to make it better. Keeping a 4-lander here with a fetch. We see Voice of Victory, another mobilizer for 2, but it stops opponents from casting spells during our turn. Great. That's going to hopefully take care of some removal or counterplay. War Leader's Call is a damager. It's an impact tremors, but it adds the buff to all of our creatures. Great. Warriors come in as 2/2s. Those humans from Adeline, those goblins all come in as 2/2s. That's great. And then we see one of the big things of why I kind of wanted to switch over to Isshin and expand a little bit more was Severina Rain. Whenever she attacks, each opponent loses X, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Remember, if an effect brings in a creature tapped and attacking, if we put Severina's ability on the bottom, it will count that creature tapped and attacking. So Severina can be particularly brutal. It, Mishra, and Arabella are kind of these 3 creatures that have this ability that can be really brutal for our opponents. If we could guarantee more artifact creatures, I'd really thought about Alibou, but Alibou is one of those cards that really needs there to be artifact creatures, and we don't have a ton of creatures that we're playing that print artifact tokens other than something like a Nimpakal. And then the problem with Alibu is Alibu's declared an attack, not attacking, if I recall correctly. So that's the other problem. I actually could be wrong about that. I don't know how many times I've read Alibu, if I'm 100% honest. But again, I don't think we have enough artifact creatures to make that a reality. But if there's a world where we start getting things that print more artifact creatures, then I'm all in to bring Alibu in and kind of have another copy of that effect. All right, well, we start with Arabella, which is great. I think I'm just going to go crack and go get my Triome. No reason not to. Fix our colors up. Make sure that we're good to go there. We draw a Farewell. Interesting. I like the idea of Arabella, but I think it's what, either Voice or Arabella? I guess let's go Arabella. I guess there's a world where I go Voice into Isshin, but I don't know that I see it. I'd have to really have an opponent who's going pretty slow for me to want to put Voice of Victory at risk to get 4 warriors, right? So I kind of think it's Isshin. Or sorry, I kind of think it's Arabella. Okay, we get kind of paid off with the Soul Ring. I do this. I can't get War Leader's Call and Voice done, can I? Bummer. I think I get the Voice down, right? As much as I want that War Leader's Call down, I think Voice makes the most sense in the long run, because then now people can't counter Isshin unless they get rid of Voice of Victory. They can't cast spells on my turn. So now with 6 mana, I can go War Leader's Call plus Isshin. And now I'm doubling up Voice of Victory and Arabella. So how this would effectively work out, right? Do the warrior triggers, do this mobilizes first. I'm making 4 of them, 4 damage to each opponent, right? Arabella then goes off twice, where X is the number of creatures we control, power 2 or less. That's 6, right? The 4 warriors, Arabella, and victories. That's 12 damage just off of Arabella, and then we're gaining 12. So 16 damage this turn on just the ability sitting on the board. And the only way our opponents could stop that on our turn is effects, right? Because Voice Victory shuts off the spells. I would fully expect someone to have a response at this point, or probably remove. See, the funny thing is, someone's probably just going to remove Arabella, which is the play, in my opinion. But the nice thing is that if they remove Arabella, it is what it is, right? Yes, Lightning or Isshin is the commander. Yes, this is the Final Fantasy version, I apologize, of Isshin. They reskinned Isshin as Lightning Lone Commando. But this is Isshin, Two Heavens is One, the original card from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. But I mean, in the world where we untap and nothing changes, I think we just continue to run it back. Get Severina in for next turn, right? Since Severina can't do anything this turn, and run the exact same thing back. All the damage off the War Leader's Call, all the damage off Arabella. Severina Rain, unfortunately, won't count for Arabella because that +1/+1 off the War Leader's Call, but I don't think we care. To be 100% honest, I think we just set up again. Severina could sack a creature to gain 2 and draw if we really want to, because if you think about it, we're going to lose these creatures to the mobilize. Severina probably just sacks one of them with her 2-mana ability to draw a card before we lose them, right? And this is where something like Zergo would come in so much handy alongside Voice of Victory, right? So that we don't lose the warriors at the end of turn. And why like the effects like this and Skull Clamp are so good, because then you can still clamp them. Well, I guess you couldn't clamp them here because they're 2/2s, right? But trying to sacrifice them for some value. And again, I just think we're in a good spot here. They basically, if they're going to go for single target removal, it has to be either Arabella or Rain. And the nice part is even if they get rid of both, we've still got the War Leader's Call dealing damage. And now we're packing a board wipe, if we need to do that on our end. But again, stopping our opponents from doing things on our turn is huge. It's going to keep us in a good spot. And arguably Arabella's worse than Rain because 1, we gain the life, and 2, the things don't have to be attacking, whereas Rain, we have to be attacking with them. So, Arabella has a higher upside than Rain does in that scenario. But those are our play tests for Isshin. Again, it's a deck I really enjoy. It's a deck I've been having a ton of fun with. And I've got some great ideas going into what we'll eventually see from Spider-Man. Edge didn't bring, in all reality, a ton that I can recall into the deck. A lot of what the Edge changes were done here in the deck for me was bringing in something like Go-Go, which can copy Isshin for the combat. because it copies at the start of combat, means it can become a copy of Isshin or anything else you want it to be at the start of combat. I'm trying to think if there's anything I actually added from Edge of Eternities. Champions from Beyond's another card from Final Fantasy that I saw do some work in another deck, so I brought it in here because it comes in and makes tokens, but it has 2 attack triggers that can actually get doubled with Isshin. So Edge of Eternities didn't really bring a ton for me, and that's okay. That's going to happen, especially if you care about updating your decks every set. There's going to be sets that just don't provide you with much value, or that you may not see right away. I've still been looking at, like I said, that Adriana. I love this idea of something like this to give attacking tokens flying. I've really thought about Sephiroth as to get some natural damage, some life loss in that way. House Squad Heavy is a card that I've thought about to come in alongside the stuff that make goblins, but it's a little bit more useful in Jetmir for some different reasons. And in the coming weeks, we'll have Jetmir in on the show, and we can talk about why the goblin package works a little bit better there. I've really thought about Blade of Selves because Myriad's an attack trigger. I've really thought about it, and bringing it in, I just haven't found that spot quite yet. But I'm kind of interested to see what Spider-Man brings and what it can give for us for some new creatures that have attack triggers, and have some fun. That's all we got for Isshin for tonight. Let's switch over to probably what most people would consider probably a more powerful commander in Ureni of the Unwritten. A big 7-mana teamer, 7/7 dragon from Tarkir Commander. Whenever it comes in or attacks, we're going to look at the top 8, put a dragon from among them onto the battlefield, and put the rest on the bottom in any order. Ureni really was born out of my previously having a Miram deck. Miram is a very popular dragon commander in its own right, a very scary dragon commander in its own right. And at the time I played Miram in my play group, it was just a little powerful for the decks that were in my play group at the time, and so I kind of decided to shelf Miram. And then when we were going back to Tarkir, I knew Tarkir was going to spawn something. Tarkir is a set that I love so much, and of course I was so excited about the Abzan support, the Mardu support giving for Isshin, that I was like, all right, Teamer's got to give me something, whether it's Stompy stuff for Goreclaw, whether it's some Gruul stuff, like it's got to give me something. And when I saw Ureni and Eshki, I was like, man, Teamer Stompy's eating well, and then Ureni is like probably perfect if you don't want to play Miram. And in fact, I think a lot of people probably looked at Ureni and said, that's my dragon commander, and never looked into any more, and I don't think they're wrong for doing that. Ureni is a huge upside. Cheating in dragons is absolutely mental, especially if you have ways to give your board haste, which we do. That means Ureni comes in, it cheats a dragon in with haste, and then you can really just start going off to the races. We have dragons that care about dealing damage when other dragons come in. Terror of the Peaks, right? Dealing damage equal to a creature's power. When it comes in, you have the Scourge of Valkus Dragon Tempest lines where you deal damage equal to the number of dragons you control when things come in. Yeah, I have PTSD from Ureni, and one of my friends that played dragons just flooded the board. Yeah, that's basically what Ureni's trying to do. And I've played sub 10 decks with sub 10 games with this deck, and in pretty much every game when Ureni's come out, it's been basically open the floodgates of getting dragons on the board, and that's basically what Miram was trying to do. So I feel like the deck's exactly what Miram was trying to do. It's just a little bit different, and I appreciate that it's a little bit different, and I've loved having not only Ureni, but I've enjoyed having the this will be my one plug, the if you could see them, the Apex sleeves that Ultra Pro's been doing. They've started to do them with the Magic Art, and they did one for all 5 of the Tarkir Dragon Lords, and I love these sleeves. I have the Ureni sleeves on this deck, I have the Nariv sleeves on Isshin, and then I have the Taval sleeves on Taval, obviously. But Ureni is a ton of fun. I love it, and let's jump into it. Fourth says, like, one of my very first games was that. Yeah, that's brutal. It's tough to watch, especially when you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know how the rules work. But you'll start to learn where the pain points are, counter Ureni, or try to deal with the dragons when they first come out, board wipes, things like that. And like I said, they're scary because they're in the air, but they're not impossible to beat. It just takes either outspeeding them or outcrafting them, right? And I think those are the two ways you really deal with big flyers. That works for demons, angels, any of them, any of those big flying tribes. You either got to outspeed them or you got to outcraft them, and it's not impossible to do. All right, so here we're looking at a four-lander with everybody's favorite dragon, Roaming Throne. That's a joke I'll always make. Roaming Throne is just still one of those cards I wish they never printed, but they printed it, and we're going to put it in the deck because not only does it double Ureni's trigger, but it doubles a lot of other dragons' triggers, and it's very good. The only downside with Roaming Throne is you cannot get it off of Ureni's ability because it's not a dragon until it hits the battlefield. And that's the only downside to Roaming Throne in this deck. We also see Inferno of the Star Mounts. Here's a flying hasty 6/6. And it has that fire-breathing ability to buff itself. If you do get it to 20, it can nuke somebody for 20 damage, which is pretty fun. And we have some ramp. So we've got 4 mana here, enough to get Roaming Throne out. We've got the Kodama's Reach, which can start sneaking us up towards 7. We're not looking half bad. I mean, we can go Kodama's Reach into Roaming Throne at this point. So we got plenty of mana. The question is just getting there. So turn 1, we see Encroaching Dragonstorm. Great. Here's another ramp spell that arguably is almost even better than Kodama's Reach, even though it's 1 mana more, because you can start bouncing it back to your hand whenever dragons come in. So I think we'll start with the Breeding Pool. Great. Turn 2, we see Dragon Tempest. There's one of the cards we love to see, giving all of our dragons haste. Beautiful here for Ureni, getting it in, dealing the damage it comes in. So I think I'm willing to get the Tempest in on here on turn 2. Okay, turn 3, we see Farseek. So Farseek, single target land, but it can be a land of differing types. Kodama's Reach here would get me a basic intapped basic to my hand. So the question is, would I rather go get a land of my choice, my Triome, something like that, or would I rather go get a land down and a land to my hand and do that? I'm trying to think which makes the most sense. I mean, technically this digs out my deck a little bit more and thins it a little bit more. Same thing with the Dragonstorm, right? What's my plan next turn, I guess, is the next question. As much as I would love it to be Roaming Throne, I almost feel like it's the Dragonstorm. We want to get to Ureni. If I do the Dragonstorm next turn, we are guaranteed to hit Ureni on turn 5, right? So I feel like the answer needs to be focus on getting Ureni in as quickly as possible, since Ureni is the reason that our deck wants to do what it wants to do. So we'll do a Forest there. We'll get a Mountain to hand. So then coming into the next turn, get the Cinderglaive tapped, play the Dragonstorm. We'll go get a island a little bit, round out our colors, and then I guess we'll get a Forest. So again, we're guaranteed Ureni next turn, and it's going to come in with haste. It's going to get its cheap, so again, unless somebody counters it, right, we're guaranteed Ureni this turn, which is ideal since it's turn 5. Arena of Glory is in here as a land for when we don't have haste on our board, because you can pay the extra mana. You can pay the extra mana, exert it, so it doesn't untap the next turn, but give a creature haste. But I don't think we care because we have the mana for Ureni. So I still think we do it. It comes in, triggers the Tempest. Somebody's going to take a damage for 1. And then Ureni is going to go ahead and start digging. And there's a lot of dragons in this deck we want to see. There's a lot of really brutal dragons. And probably one of the single best ones when it comes to this exact board state in Astral Dragon is kind of exactly what we want to see. So Astral Dragon probably would have been better if we had something like Miramount. The Dragonstorm would have bounced back to our hand. But this is an almost perfect... not almost. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's a very good choice here. So Astral Dragon comes in. We have another Dragon Tempest trigger for 2. But it says when it comes in, we're going to make 2 tokens that are copies of a non-creature permanent we control, except they're 3/3 dragons. And I think the best choice is Dragon Tempest, right? And the reason then is because now every dragon coming in is going to deal even more damage. I remember Ureni has haste, which means Ureni's attacking this turn, and it's going to trigger again. So these guys are 3/3 dragons. They have haste because of Dragon Tempest. They also each, because they are dragons that entered, are going to trigger all 3 Dragon Tempests. So we're going to have 3 triggers of 4 damage, because there's 4 dragons to go out to any target. So we've dealt 1 with Ureni, 2 with Astral Dragon, and now 2 triggers of 4. Sorry, not 3. I apologize. Or no, yeah. No, it's even more than that. It's 3 each. So 6 triggers there, because they all are going to see them because they come in at the same time. Ooh, brutality. So you have a bunch of damage to hand out. Go to combat. Ureni goes off again. Astral Dragon does get to attack as well. And the important point here is pretty much no matter what dragon we put in, we're getting 3 more triggers of Dragon Tempest, right, as this dragon comes in. Meringue could bounce something back, could be particularly brutal on turn 5. Goldspan could set up some more Goldspan could set up some more mana. Lathless could give us more dragons when other dragons come in, which seems pretty good to me. I think that's probably my choice, either it or Meringue if I'm really worried about bouncing something back to somebody's hand. But I think it's Lathless. Lathless comes in. Again, we get 3 triggers of the Tempest for 5. So again, 15 damage just on the spot. Then these guys in combat. And now we're just eating pretty, right? Because unless somebody, if somebody removes Ureni, which would be good, but even if they don't, even if they do, all we have to do is play dragons to trigger Lathless, right? Which you get another dragon token, which triggers the Tempest again. And now you could start to see where specifically this Dragon Tempest line just gets so out of hand. And this is why I love introducing Mirim into the mix, which starts making copies of those dragons again, because then you just start reaming this mechanic out, and you're really just going to deal more damage. Like I said, even if somebody does remove, let's say they remove Ureni, Ureni's gone. I've got what, 8 mana, 9 with the arena, Roaming Throne. Roaming Throne enters as a dragon, which is going to trigger Lathless to make a 5/5. I've got 3 triggers of 6. 3 triggers of 5, 3 triggers of 6 when I make the 5/5. Wait, will Roaming Throne of another creature? Lathless goes off twice because of Roaming Throne, making me 2 of those dragons. And now you can start to see where this really just gets out of hand. So Roaming Throne comes in, makes me 2 dragons. Those 2 dragons then get, it'd be 1 gets 3 triggers of 6, 1 gets 3 triggers of 7, because it's 2 separate triggered abilities. And then we just Deceptive Frostkite for, I don't know, probably Astral Dragon, just to make it worse enough. It comes in as a copy of the Astral Dragon. Makes what, 2 more copies of the Dragon Tempest, and the board has to be dead at this point, with plenty of damage. And then you still have combat, which Roaming Throne won't have haste because Dragon Tempest says a creature with flying enters, so Roaming Throne wouldn't have haste, but all of these other dragons will. And even if we don't end this game on just Dragon Tempest triggers alone, which I think we would by having this come in as a copy of Astral Dragon, we'd be plenty there with combat plus this. So this is just specifically why Astral Dragon is such a big target for you, especially with Dragon Tempest. And even if it's not Dragon Tempest, think about something like Temur Ascendancy or Garruk's Uprising. Now you're just drawing cards, right, from your creatures coming in. You're refilling your hand and you're getting access to more things, right, and just having a good time. So I think we pretty much plenty got there on the first one. Let's run into the second one. Here, a little bit different. Got a 3-lander. We see Mirim. We see Fanatic Aronis, one of the only non-dragons I play in the deck, just because it taps for great mana. And it's a great play to get your way into Ureni if you can get a 4-power creature down early. There's Temur Ascendancy. Can also give haste, but whenever a creature's power 4 getter comes in, we get to draw a card. Little awkward, but I think we can still get to Fanatic on turn 2. So we're going to go for Arena Glory on turn 1. It's going to come in tap since we don't have a mountain. Turn 2 Fanatic, right? Get that in, get that going. We're still a couple mana away from Mirim. My thought here is these 2 for Arcane, those 3 for Carnelian Orbs. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 1 off of Ureni. But if we don't draw land next turn, I think Mirim's still a good play. It still turns Fanatic Aronis online, and we're still in a great position, right, with Mirim being out. So if we don't top the land, I still think Mirim's worth it, and I think we're still just off to the races on having a good time. If we do top the land, it's Ureni. It could come in with haste because of Carnelian Orb, and we're still in great shape. So let's see, does the luck come on our side? Unfortunately, the luck doesn't come on our side, and it doesn't come on our side with a dragon. We would rather cheat out from Ureni than hardcast, but that's fine. I still think it's Mirim with haste. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And then just attack with Mirim. And now we untap and really threaten because Now this is tapping for 4, so this is 7/9 mana, and again we could still give Ureni haste with the Carnelian Orb. I still think that makes the most sense. We'd have what, 2 mana left over? We could, Nature's Lore if we want to. But you never know. Like we could hit something like Gainax and it comes in and gives us a treasure, and then we get something like Temur Ascendancy down or something. I'm just trying to think of like what's the oddest example, but this is where Miram is really nutty with Ureni. So Ureni comes in with haste because of the Carnelian Orb. Its triggers are going to go on the stack, but Miram's trigger is going to go on the stack. Miram saw a non-token dragon comes in, so it makes a copy of Ureni that isn't legendary. Now, the copy of Ureni won't have haste because we only gave haste to the original Ureni. So the copy of Ureni won't have haste, but it's still going to trigger. So we're going to get 2 Ureni triggers just off them entering. Now, I'm going to choose to resolve the token one first, just off the scenario we hit anything relevant. And here we managed 2 in something like Terror of the Peaks. Terror of the Peaks starts the fun of Miram, and then when Terror of the Peaks comes in, we get a copy of it. So now Terror of the Peaks is going to see the copy come in, doling out 5 damage. The copy, of course, won't see itself come in. But so now we've dealt out 5 damage with Terror of the Peaks, and now we're going to go for Ureni's original trigger, going 8 more deep. See, like Astro Dragon isn't as good in this scenario because yes, I could get like a couple copies of Arcane Signet, but like truthfully, I think the better dragon here is Twin Flame Tyrant, because Terror of the Peak sees Twin Flame enter and it's on the battlefield, meaning it's going to double the Terror of the Peak's damage, and then it actually doesn't double, right? It quadruples because we're going to have the copy of Miram come in first before we trigger both, right, Terror of the Peak's effects. So both Terror of the Peaks see this one, which deals 6, 12 damage to 2 targets. Then they both see the original come in, right, 6, 12 damage to 2 targets. And then we haven't even got into combat where, again, this gets to attack because it had haste because of the orb, and Miram gets to attack. So now Miram's threatening, 24 damage on somebody because of the Twin Flames, and then Ureni gets to search again on its attack. And then I think we could stop here because you can really see the fun, and I'm going to use the word fun because it's fun for me, that you get with Miram and Ureni together as Miram just makes everything that comes off Ureni even better. And that's where the Dragon Tempest, Terror of the Peaks, Scourge of Valkus line gets so much better, right? When you start bringing in things and doubling them up. We can simulate the trigger. I don't know that it really matters. Someone's got to have flying blockers on turn 5. They're taking 24 from Miram, and they're taking Commander Lethal from Ureni if they don't have a blocker, because that's 7 to 14 to 28. So they'd have to have what, a 3 toughness blocker, so that only 4 would go over and double twice into 16. Like if they only have a 2 power blocker, 5 gets over 5, 10, 20. Okay, so they'd be safe. Yeah, it'd have to be like a 2 power flyer to not just die to Ureni straight out, right? And then Miram, same thing. And now Miram doesn't have trample, so it's probably more guaranteed to get chump blocked. But again, this is where now we know what's on the board. We know where to point the dragons. Of this trigger, I think it's just Gainax, print a bunch of treasures, make our opponents think we have something in our hand, right? Because we're going to net 1 treasure when this comes in. The copy is going to net us 2 treasures, right? 1 from the original, and then the original will see this one come in, and it makes 1 for itself coming in. Then you have 2 more sets of Terror of the Peaks triggers. So this is the upside. This is what we wanted to see. Miram, Ureni, Terror of the Peaks. Like, this is just great, and this is one of those lines that we love to see off of Ureni with the right dragons coming at the right time. Brutality, this is turn 5. But I think that's such one of the great uses of Fnatic, if you can get it going, is it could just print a ton of mana for you, which is funny because we almost didn't need it, right? Like we almost hit the 4th land and wouldn't even have needed it to tap for 4, right? But it was just getting the Miram and then getting the Ureni that just really set us off and got us going. All right, 2-lander here with Arcane Signet and Farsi. And we've got a potentially brutal combo in Ancient Copper Dragon and Aggravated Assault. Remember, Aggravated Assault, you pay 5 mana, take another combat. Copper Dragon says whenever it hits a player, you roll a d20, you make that many treasures. As long as you're rolling 5 or more, this is a combination that could give us infinite combats. And remember, Ureni's getting a dragon every time it attacks, so this is a potentially dangerous combo, especially with something like Gainax. Gainax might even be able to print enough treasures depending on what we have access to. So turn 1, I think we'll go for the Forest. Turn 2, Flooded Grove. I'm trying to think. Arcane Signet into fail. Next turn is still 4 mana. I think this is going to kind of be awkward. I don't know if my pathing here really matters. I think it's just go and get the Triumph. I can't think of a world where my pathing between Farseek and Arcane Signet matters here, but maybe. Oh, well, it kind of did. Because I can go Arcane Signet into Selvala now. So I guess it did kind of matter. Glad we did it the right way. Selvala, whenever a creature comes in, its controller can draw a card if its power is greater than every other creature's power, and then Selvala can tap for mana equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. Great when we have lots of big dragons going around. So now, again, here's another turn 4 Ureni. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, 2 from the Selvala, and then 7. So there's Ureni. We would have 2 triggers, Ureni's ETB and Selvala's draw. I've kind of always just chosen to draw first and tempt my risk, tempt fate on whether or not the draw matters. Definitely didn't here. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attack this turn, but I really love just printing Old Gnawbone here. This is just going to turn Aggravated Assault online, especially since Ureni has Trample. Old Gnawbone should just be the injection we need to just make this, hopefully, as long as nobody removes either, could be game over, especially if no one has if the first opponent doesn't have a flyer. I think this could just be straight up game over next turn when Gnawbone and Ureni can attack. If everybody had flyers, this might have to squeak out. I guess the person would have to have a 3/3 flyer for this not to. Everybody would have to have at least a 3/3 flyer for Ureni's Trample not to matter for the purposes of Gnawbone. But this is why Gnawbone is such a good dragon. So we would basically untap. Right, untapping with 7 mana here, but Selvala can tap for 7. So we've just got a ton of mana to play with. Ag for 3. Gainax next us the treasure. I guess Laughless. I guess we could have done Laughless before Gainax, but it doesn't really particularly matter. And then again, we go to combat. Again, if somebody doesn't have a flyer, if Ureni hits, this should be infinite combats because it makes 7 treasures off its damage. And then obviously commander damage probably kills before the Aggravated Assault does with the amount of combats. But let's see if we can make it any worse with Ureni's trigger. Here we see Silver Dragon. Broodscholar Surge could be fun. The thing is, we can't give this haste. Otherwise, the Broodscholar Scourge would be again another fun way to do that. I think it's just the Broodcaller Scourge. It comes in, making me a treasure off of Gainax, and then a 5/5 off of Laughless, which I do believe makes us another treasure off of Gainax. And then again, I have 4 treasures at least. So again, someone would have to have at least a 6. It would have to have a 6 power, 6 toughness flyer for me not to make enough treasures to just roll this, especially since Gnawbone's attacking as well. And then I can put permanence for my hand in with the Broodcaller, but the game's over. If nobody doesn't have the right flyers, this is just more than enough. I'm getting treasures here, and that's more than enough treasures to play for the Ag Assault. They'd have to remove the Ag Assault, and if someone does remove the Ag Assault, I mean, I don't think it really matters. Then they've got to deal with the board of dragons, right, that are just going to take over the game. Another pretty brutal one, but I think it just goes to show you the ceiling of a deck like this and why it can be really powerful when you get the right draws, right? Let's go another one here. 3-lander with the Arcane Signet. Okay, so we're getting up there, but Nogi really helps, reducing the cost of our dragons. We see Wrathful Red and then Thundermane, which can let us cast off the top. Nothing ideal, I guess. No, the Nogi reducing the cost helps, but we'll go from there. We see a Dragon's Horde, that's great. Another piece of ramp for us. So I'm thinking Arcane Signet here. If I go Haven Nogi, this gives me a minimum 4 mana to cast a 5-cost dragon. If I go Entish, sack the mountain, goes and gets me 2 lands, then I'm at 5 mana. I could go Horde into Nogi. That might make the most sense in my head, because I think it gives us the best chance of hitting. I think that gives us the best chance of hitting Uranian Stride. Of course, better if we top a land. But Dragon's Horde, Nogi, right now we're guaranteed to cast Ureni no matter what next turn, plus with the reduction from Nogi, right? And then we cast Ureni. Unfortunately, it doesn't get haste, but the Horde will get a counter. And then Ureni goes off when it comes in. We'll see what we can get ourselves access to. Scourge of Valkus is definitely enticing. Same thing with Lathis, but Scourge really helps, right, with that damage. Well, I guess so does Twin Flame Tyrant as well. My line next turn is the shenanigans with Deceptive Frogkite just coming in and copying Ureni. It will die to its Legends trigger and then still crack Ureni's trigger. And then I'd have, 1, 2, 3, 5 mana left. I could get in, something like Thunder Mage or something like Wrathful Red. What makes the most sense? Scourge is sticking out to me, but I also feel like Twin Flame can't be ignored. Doubling up Ureni's damage is not something I can ignore. That's going to put another counter on the Horde. And then Nogi is almost there, being able to turn into a dragon on attack. Just not quite there yet. Again, we untap. I don't think the extra mana changes it, right? Because Ancient's only 7, but it doesn't have haste, right? I still think it's Hellkite, copy Ureni, and because Hellkite doesn't give it another name, it will be a copy of Ureni. We're going to choose to have this copy die, which is going to trigger the Dragon's Horde that comes in, but it's still going to proc a Ureni trigger, which is the goal here. 2 mana to proc a Ureni trigger, right? Pretty chance we'll like. There's the Inferno with haste. You have the Meringue if you want to bounce things. That's not a bad reveal. Like, if my opponent has a better board, I probably go for the Meringue, but otherwise I kind of like the Inferno to deal potentially 12 damage to somebody this turn, right, with it. And I still have 6 mana left, -1, to still put one of these guys in. So I think I like that the Horde gets another counter. If I haven't used it, I could draw. So let's say I did blue. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I could go Thunder Mane and still draw off the Horde, remove a counter from it, and draw. And then we get to look at the top, so we know Command Tower's on top. Ureni attacks. The Inferno will attack, and so will the Twin Flame. So we're going to get a Ureni attack on attack, or trigger on attack, right? So this is, again, Ureni being on attack is even worse. Ooh. Broodcaller Scourge is interesting. I could put in Wrathful that way. Balefire would be a setup for next turn. Savage Ventmaw would be a setup for next turn, right? Oh, the damage is doubled. I could get Silver Dragon in this turn with Broodcaller Scourge, because my thought here is, remember, the Scourge says when a dragon you control deals damage to a player, you put a permanent with mana value less or equal to that damage from your hand on the battlefield. So Ureni's 14, Inferno's 12, and that is 6. So I mean, it could be just Silver Dragon plus Blastfire, Furnace Hellkite, and then next turn we're going to draw a ton of cards with the Silver Dragon. And that could just be enough to end it. I mean, giving them all double strikes is going to be brutal. And I think it's, unless somebody has a board wipe, right, we just take the game over. The interesting thing about Blast Furnace Hellkite of note is that it says creatures attacking your opponents have double strike, meaning including your opponent's creature. If your opponent's creatures are attacking another one of our opponents, they have double strike, which is kind of fun. The only thing I dislike about this board is we're just left wide open to a wipe. But I mean, we have, again, as a creature deck, you have to accept that a board wipe is and will sometimes be the answer of your opponents, and there's nothing we can do about it at this point. But again, Ureni dealt out 14 damage. Infernal probably 6, maybe or 12, maybe 14 if we had the mana left over to Fire Breathe it. Twin Flame dealing out 6. I mean, it was a great turn, right? And then you still next turn could bring Ureni back out. We have 8 mana on board, so maybe we draw the land, and if Nogi goes away, and we potentially could have the 9th mana. But again, just another example of Ureni hitting its paces, getting dragons out, and just being the deck I want it to be. But let's go into our last hand I had set aside tonight. If you're still watching, I'd love to know if you're out there. Let me know how you're doing this evening. Are you enjoying the playtests? What decks would you like to see on future episodes of Let's Playtest? Probably the first few, I'm going to be keep knocking out my main decks just because I still think it's fun to showcase the playtesting and my approach to it. And I would eventually like for Let's Playtest to be also a prepared video based on kind of the videos of the week. I think that could be fun as well. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. But at least for the foreseeable moment, I was trying to find live stream content that I could do that makes me happy, that it's something I'm interested in and could be something you're interested in as well, and have some fun. And gameplay's coming as far as Brawl goes. I kind of got caught up in some family stuff at home this week with little inner sleep issues, so I didn't really have as much time to do the Brawl stuff as I wanted to this week, but it's still coming. I promise. I'm working hard on it behind the scenes, mainly just trying to make it the way I want it to be. Really, I'll be honest, I'm a hard critic on myself in some ways, and I think I'm just trying to make the content the way I want to make it and make it good for y'all, because at the end of the day, I want you to enjoy the content you watch. That's the point of you subscribing to the channel. For the members, that's the point of you being a member of the channel, is to enjoy the content that gets put out. And my hope for Brawl content is once I start putting it out, I don't stop. So that's kind of been my reason to kind of hang back and wait another week. But I promise it's on its way. The videos aren't stopping. I'm excited for Spider-Man coming up. I'm excited for Avatar. Getting to see some of those cards this week was cool. And as a content creator, it's a dream to have more cards to come out and more cards to talk about. But let's knock this one last hand. If you're still in the chat, I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know what you think of the playtest tonight. Let me know what you think of the videos. I'd love to have some chats on our way out. Otherwise, we'll knock through this one. We'll have a good time. And I will see y'all back next Sunday night for some more Let's Playtest. But let's do it. We're looking at a 3-lander here. With the Dragon's Horde, I love it. Dragon Seeker Shaman, bringing those dragons down by 2. I love it. Probably the best of our reducers, right? And we absolutely love seeing it. So I'm thinking turn 1, Catch Your Triome here. Turn 2, I'm thinking the Cavern. Cavern's a great thing to have on our side, especially against decks that are going to try to counter Ureni, right? Next comes the question of which makes more sense, the Horde or the Shaman. If I Shaman this turn, I can technically play Goldspan next turn, if worst case scenario, right? But I don't actually hate that line because the treasure would then add extra mana, right? And Goldspan seems like a great dragon to have around. And we still do have the double red there. So here, again, I go Dragon's Horde. I can't play the Goldspan, right? Because I'd only have 2 mana. I think the answer is still Goldspan and make the treasure. Now, I could then now crack the treasure in the harbor to put the Horde in if I wanted to. But right now I can cast, well, I guess either way I can cast Ureni next turn. But that's if Shaman and Goldspan survive, right? If Shaman doesn't survive, I still can't cast Ureni at the moment. So that does put a damper on what decision we make. I guess if we're not putting Ureni out with haste, there's always Goldspan attacking again and getting us up to that 7-mana threshold. I think I'll just put the Horde in. I think it makes them, in my head, I think it makes the most sense. And again, we just hope that nobody takes out the Shaman. And again, if somebody does, you just attack with Goldspan and you play Ureni after combat, right? Because you'd still have the 7 mana. So right now we're sitting at 5 mana. Again, Dragon Speaker would let us play Ureni right now. We'll just play in the arena that nobody removed it. So we just get Ureni in. We'll go ahead and crack the 8 and see what we get access to. Again, Goldspan really helps us, right, with that mana from the treasures. guess it's just Utvara. Not a bad one. Can make those dragon tokens when our dragons attack. Really great because we're getting at least one dragon attacking this turn. So that's a treasure and that big 6/6 dragon, right? Which is pretty great. Gives us more bodies on the board. That's what, 3 counters on Dragon's Horde. And I think we're just in good shape. Somebody wiping the board again, not ideal, but it does happen. If it does, we do have enough mana to play some of the other dragons in our hand. But if we come back with our board as it is, 7 mana on board with the treasure, this could mean another dragon token, right? Because of Udvar when we attack. I mean, the hope would be you attack with Ureni, get into something like Scourge of Valkus, Tear the Peaks, right? Where we could start getting damage off these dragon tokens when we attack. That would be the ideal line there if I'm going to go for this. Earthquake as just a single green right now, right? 7 plus 8 is, yeah. So this Earthquake's just a single green. So, I mean, that plus Sean... it would also get reduced because of Dragon Speaker. So that's just a single green. This is 4 mana. So that's 5. Would it make more sense to dump Ureni in? Deal out the damage? I think it's still the Inferno because it has haste, right? Go to combat, 1, 2, 3, 4 attack. Not that we didn't. I don't think we had to use the treasure there. Get that. We'll go digging off Ureni first, again, just to see if something changes based upon not doing Varos triggers first. Didn't. I think it's just the copper. So then Udvar is making 1, 2, 3, 4 this turn. And you could still crack the treasures to get 4 red mana to Fire Breathe Inferno up this turn if you wanted to, up to 10. If we wanted to. Again, I mean, I like the board state. I mean, it would really stink for someone to wipe the board, but the treasures sitting there do help. I mean, it would mean we'd be at 7 mana if somebody wipes the board, enough to potentially get, Laughless back in or something like that. But again, not as flash in the panty, right, as last time or the times before, right? Because we didn't see that catalyst of haste or any of those things. But it just goes to show you that, like, on the low end rolls of this deck where you're just getting dragons on board, this is still a scary board for somebody to deal with. They have to wipe the board at this point. Otherwise, you just have so many I didn't mean to do that. You have so many dragons on the board right now that just are going to mean that they're going to mean the end of at least one player next turn, if not more, depending on what people have with flying out. I mean, I hope at the end of the day that nothing that we saw there was super like Magical Christmas Landy in a sense, because I think other than single target removal on Ureni, I hope that we played the game like we would have. I mean, that's the problem, right? Is so much of our lines here revolve around Ureni either coming in or attacking, and so I think single target removal on Ureni at the right time can be particularly brutal. Remember, as long as it hits the battlefield, it's going to go off, so they can't remove it in response to it entering because it's still going to go off. And I believe the trigger would still go off if you remove it in response to attacking because it's a triggered ability. So as long as the triggers go off, I think you still get good value. I think it's just going to be continuing to form this list of dragons we have in our deck around. In my head, it's if we're only getting one dragon, like if I revealed 7 lands in each of the dragons in my deck, would I be let down by that dragon coming in? I guess that's the thought I've always had in the back of my head. And the answer depends. Like, I think I don't necessarily want it to be 7 lands and a I'm trying to think of a dragon specifically off the top of my head. Just meaning a dragon that's more of a support piece. Like, I don't know that I want to see 7 lands and a Wrathful Red Dragon, even though it's a great dragon. But it's just something you have to think about. Fourth says, what do I mean by Christmas Land? Christmas Landy, like, I get every trigger I want to get. No one has any removal. My game plan's perfect. My opponents just sit there and watch me do it. I get to make every decision I want to make in the game. I'm steamrolling the game. No one's interacting with me. Like, that's what I mean by Christmas Land. It's like, I get to do everything I want to do. I have no responses. Nobody's interacting with me. I get to play everything I want, and my game plan goes perfectly without a hitch. That's what I mean by Christmas Land. Because right? In most Commander games, you do not get to play the game Magical Christmas Land, where you get to do everything you want to do and expect all your cards to sit there. People have removal, people have board wipes, people have cards that shut down playing your commander, or shut down playing more than one spell a turn, or draw too many cards, or you know what I mean? Like there's things in Commander that just exist that most of the time will shut down a deck from perfectly running every single time. But I still think it's good to playtest and see Magical Christmas Land and see, okay, if my deck isn't inhibited, this is the line I want to go for, if at minimum, so that you know what you're trying to do. You know what your thought process is. You know where your um, level 10, 11, 12 on the volume scale is. That way, if you only need to, that way, if you only can get to a 5 or a 6 on that scale, you still know, right, where your line is. I think that's the danger, right, of playtesting, is that we can just get in these Magical Christmas Land situations where no one's removing our things. We're putting out everything we want to do. But I think it's still important to see that. It's still important to see it in front of you so that you know what your deck does and how it works, so that when you get into the gameplay scenarios where you have to decide what makes more sense this turn, where's my highest upside, what's my play this turn, where can I go this turn, where can I go that turn, right? You just have more options. You have more ways to think about the game. You have more ways to make those decisions, as opposed to just going, oh, this card, I think, or I'm not really sure what's going to happen, or I don't know what they have. Because personally, I've always found when you're playing the game, you can never know what your opponents are going to have, and even when you play with people, you're still not ever going to know what they have. And we have to make our decisions based on what's best for our deck and what's best for our game, within reason, right? Like if somebody's playing a deck that's like all board wipes, obviously don't run a whole board out if you know it's going to be that. But very rarely in Commander do we ever have that much knowledge, right, that something's going to happen. But what I mean is that you should be operating your turn to get the most value out of your turn, even if your opponent does remove your things. Because at the end of the day, you don't know if they have it or if they don't have it. And we don't want to get into these Schrodinger's cat conversations about what if they do have it, what if they don't have it. Like at the end of the day, you play for them not having it. And if you have the mana up and the protection, keep it up. Keep the counterspell up, keep the heroic intervention up, keep the things up to protect your board, and play into them when you have them. But if you don't have them, roll the dice, right? At the end of the day, I think that's especially a deck like the two we played tonight are the decks that need to roll the dice and press our advantage. If you're playing a control deck, you're not going to press your advantage. You're going to sit back. You're going to wait to try and interact with your opponents and do the things you do. If you're a go wide type deck, you're not going to attack until you're ready to. You're going to try to take the turns to set up. If you're a ramp deck, you're going to take the turns to ramp, even if somebody's pinging you for 2 or 3 a turn, because you need to get the lands down, right, to do your game plan. So it's like, as much as I think Magical Christmas Land is a danger, it's also a very good thing, because I think depending on what you are you a control deck? Are you a mid-range deck? Are you a an aggro deck? Are you, depending on what you are, a stompy, all that good, all the archetypes aside, you got to know what's your propensity just to attack and get the momentum going, or is your deck want to sit back and prepare and and kind of take an extra turn or two, right, to take on the game. The two decks we talked about tonight, I think, are on the aggressive side of mid range. I can't call either of them straight out aggro decks, because I don't think either of them are. Ureni, I think you're going to see some games where it's a straight up mid range deck that's just going to be really aggressive and is going to pound your opponents into the sands. And then you're going to have games where you have to ramp to 8 or 9 mana before you can get Ureni, and you're going to go a little bit slower and you'll be more methodical. But I think it's important to know that your deck has those capabilities, right? Which side of the game am I on? And not only that, but like, if I know my opponent has a lot of counter spells, right? They've sat down with a Baral deck that has a ton of counter spells. I'm gonna think twice about running Ureni out into open mana, right? To know that my opponent has it, right? That's where knowing what your opponents are playing can help as well. And so that's kind of I think the main limit to playtesting on Arena or Architect or whatever deck builder you choose, is you cannot simulate what your opponents are going to do. But the hope is, in your playtesting, if you have a Swords to Plowshares in your hand and you can leave an open white mana up, leave the open white mana up. See what you think in the back of your head. Oh, I'm going to see what my opponent's having. Maybe I'm going to play this removal. Or, hey, I have a Heroic Intervention in my hand. I'm going to leave 2 mana up in case one of my opponents has a board wipe, right? Like, you could still bake some of that natural removal and protection in the back of your head while you're playtesting. I think it's easier to kind of go gas, go gas, go gas when you're playtesting, because there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But again, I would still posit that you need to do that. You need to see what your deck does with all gas, so that if you get into the games where you have all gas, right, you know what to do and you know how to take advantage of it. And I think most of the time you're going to hit somewhere in that bell curve of having to sit back a turn or having to interact a turn, or or what have you. I also think we have to remember that, again, like I said, both of these decks are fairly mid-rangey, which means they're trying to be aggressive. They're trying to attack. They're not trying to control my opponents. I'm not trying to have removal available every turn. I'm not trying to sit back and counter my opponent's spells. And I've accepted that in that game, I am trying to be the aggressor. I'm trying to get going. I'm trying to get damage out there. And so we also kind of want to know what is our deck trying to do, so that we're not trying to play it differently than what it will be. I think between these two decks, when I sit down with Ureni, someone's probably going to know what they're going to expect. A big team or Dragons deck is probably going to be the threat at the table. And my opinion, let's live up to it. Let's show them a good time, right? They know what they're expecting from us. Let's do it. Whereas Isshin generally tends to have a different vibe at the table. It's known to be a powerful commander when you get the right things out, but it's not a threat as soon as it comes down. Most of the time, they're the pieces around Isshin that become the threat, and so your more experienced players will know how to interact with that. And it also goes into how we build our decks. I don't know if that rant means anything. It means something to me, but I hope it means something to y'all. I hope you've enjoyed the playtest tonight. Again, Let's Playtest was my idea to try to find a way that I could live stream, interact with y'all. Please use the chat next week. Even use the chat now. When the video's out, I respond to every comment. I'd love to talk with you about what you thought of the playtest. If you're watching this back, not live, I'd still love to chat with you about every playtest that was in this video. I'd love to know what you think of them. Grill me on my choices. If I made the wrong choice, I'd love to talk about why. Because at the end of the day, I am a player that wants to learn from every hand of Magic that I draw. I want to learn from every deck that I play, and there's no way we can do that other than making the mistakes and learning from them. So thank you all so much for watching tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the views and the subscriptions and the time that you spend with me. It's something that matters a lot more to me than I can ever express. It matters for me and my family and the channel that I'm hoping to build here for you. So let me know if you have any suggestions on what you want to see next week on Let's Playtest. I think for the next week or two, it'll probably still be decks that are in either my main or my test box or more recent videos. I'd like to make it a little bit more topical once we get towards Spider-Man. I'd like to, like I said, once we get towards Spider-Man, I'd love to do it where it's like 2 decks I did that week, so we can kind of talk about the more relevant commanders, rather than, just the random stuff in my box. But the truth is, we're kind of, with the way that Magic's release schedule is right now, we're kind of on our way out of Edge of Eternities. It's scary to say that out loud, because I feel like it was just a week ago that I was making pre-con upgrades, but it's the truth. We only have a couple weeks before Spider-Man comes out, but I'm excited for it. I'm working on it behind the scenes. I can't wait till y'all give all y'all the content that I hope you're going to enjoy. That's it for me this evening, and I will catch you all in the next